story that was read in synagogue on the morning of my bar mitzvah. And I've lived with this story and struggled with it, and I've really loved it since that day. It goes like this. One day, a man was walking along a beach when he noticed a boy picking something up and gently throwing it into the ocean. Approaching the boy, the old man asked, "What are you doing?" The youth replied, "I'm throwing starfish back into the ocean. The surf is up and the tide is going out. If I don't throw them back, they'll die." "Son," the man said, "don't you realize that there are miles and miles of beach and hundreds of starfish? You can't possibly make a difference." After listening politely, the boy bent down, picked up another starfish, and he threw it back into the surf. And then, smiling at the man, he said, "I made a difference for that one." So this is a story that's built on irony. The older man sees the seemingly foolish young boy trying to change the world. And in the end, we learn that it's not the elder, but the young boy who holds the wisdom. That each individual act did not change the world, but it did make a world of difference. I was inspired by this story as a young teenager, but over the years, I became quite skeptical of the story and of the boy's wisdom. Why was no one asking how so many starfish ended up on the beach in the first place? Community organizers are taught not to jump into problems until they really listen to everyone in the community. And second, why was the boy acting alone? Perhaps his time could have been better spent recruiting a team of starfish throwers. Maybe he could have found someone with a dump truck that could have lifted thousands of starfish in the time that it took him just to pick up a handful. And the piece of information that really caused me to turn on this young boy, I learned a few years ago. I read in a newspaper that the Great Barrier Reef, the world's largest coral reef system, was under attack. It was shrinking at a rapid pace. And who was the culprit? A species of invasive starfish. I suddenly imagined this young boy with the best of intentions trying desperately to save these starfish, blissfully unaware of the secondary damage that his reintroduction of these creatures to the water might have been causing. There have been moments during this last year when I've lied awake worried about the enormity of the problems and the injustices that we face in the world. As I'm one person with two hands, and there are hundreds of thousands of starfish on the beach. And there's so much debate, even within our like-minded communities, about how to solve these problems. And there's grifters and there are trolls who organize people and money to tell us that the injustices of the world don't exist. And there simply aren't enough hours in the day to do it all. And on top of that, we're living in a pandemic that's making it still hard to gather together and organize. And I'm tired. I'm feeling a bit stuck. And I'm puzzled about what I think about the boy and about the old man and even about the starfish. And the place where I'm feeling the most stuck is when I think about the global climate emergency. This year, language used by the international community around climate change has shifted dramatically. In March, the UN Secretary General chided the international community. He said, "The climate crisis has passed a point of no return, even though we had plenty of warning and we could have acted earlier." To climate scientists, this means that the amplified warming effect caused by the carbon in our atmosphere will force the world to confront increasing warming and natural disaster and human displacement on a scale that we have not yet known. And anything that we do will only lessen the pain, it won't eliminate it. And this new science, combined with the failure of our international community to meet the moment with comprehensive action, has led many to adopt a stance of climate nihilism. For if we really are past the point of no return, what can we possibly do? It's turned those who might have been casual climate activists into skeptics. Debates that were once limited to quieter spaces have become more prominent. People asking each other what sort of societies are worth building in the face of future destruction. Debating if it's reasonable or even ethical to have children in a world that dramatically will change in the next century. And to speak these words on the bima, it makes me want to cry. Because I love this world. And I love my family and my friends and our community. And I'm fearful. And I'm uncertain about what exactly comes next. The only thing that feels reasonable right now is to yell at the young boy throwing starfish into the sea. Foolish boy, the world is ending. Why do you keep throwing starfish? Climate nihilism is becoming more pervasive. And the irony of hopeful people turning into cynics is that this is exactly what so many climate deniers have been hoping would happen for decades. That those who denied the human effects of warming and those who have profited greatly over the pollution of our environment, well, this was their wish all along. That those of us committed to building a more equitable world, a more sustainable world, would simply get too tired. That we would adopt an attitude of despair and that we would simply give up. What this moment calls for is a delicate balance between practical action to mitigate future climate disaster, with a hope large enough to encompass the enormity of the problem that we face. And this doesn't only feel like a paradox, it is a paradox. We know that any action we take to mitigate climate change is simply too small. And yet we can't desist, we need to act. We have to somehow be completely hopeful and completely practical at the same time. The climate activist Joanna Macy calls this balance between hope and action active hope. She describes it as becoming active participants in bringing about a world that we hope for. It's a transformation of hope from an emotion to a practice. Macy tells a meta-story about a climate revolution that she sees happening in front of her eyes. She calls it the Great Turning, and it has 3 parts. She tells a story of business as usual until a great unraveling occurs, an unraveling perhaps like the moment we find ourselves in right now, that draws attention to the disasters of the business as usual world. And then finally, a group of people and groups of people who will not let the great unraveling have the last word begin to develop new creative responses that build life-sustaining communities that help our world heal and thrive. This is the Great Turning. It happens slowly, and then all at once, like a cruise liner slowly turning in the sea. And Macy explains that hope in this definition does not mean hopefulness. It's not dependent on optimism that our outcome will be achieved. Rather, it's about banding together to bring what we desire into being. Simply that. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are days that elegantly mix the 2 actions we most need right now, action and hope. We have a great turning narrative too in our tradition. It's called Teshuva. Teshuva is a mix of prayer and action to return the world and ourselves and to bring what we most desire into being. And it's not built on optimism either. I know that at the end of my Teshuva practice this year, I more likely than not will fall into the same patterns that I fall into every year. And yet, I've made a religious commitment in solidarity with all of you to work towards that very change anyway. Our great turning narrative, it's most apparent in the Untitled Chapter prayer that we'll say during Musaf. In Untitled Chapter, we tell ourselves a story of trembling and fear before a monarch sitting on a throne. And interestingly, we're not fearful because of the monarch's great power, but rather because this monarch has the wisdom, tiskor hamishkachot, to remember all of the things that we have forgotten. So we're not afraid of the king because of his ability to punish. No, we're terrified because sitting on the throne is not a king at all, but really a mirror. At the moment of Untitled Chapter, we look at the throne and we see ourselves. We really see ourselves. And when we look closely enough, we see all the scars and all the blemishes and all the brokenness, the real us, both individually and collectively. And we tremble and we shake. Hine Yom Hadin, today is the day of judgment, not of evaluation, but of self-reflection. And when we see ourselves and our community as we really are, it's possible that we also might freeze, that we too might feel despair, that there's simply too much change that needs to happen. But Untitled Chapter provides 3 remedies: Teshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, repentance, prayer, and justice. These can avert the evil decree. At first glance, it feels like throwing starfish again. You're saying that the true way to change ourselves is by saying the Shema a bit louder, by putting a few additional coins in the tzedakah box. Silly boy, clearly throwing starfish, it's not going to make any difference. But I'm understanding these words this year a bit differently through these dimensions of the Great Turning. Tefillah. These are the holding actions that help us raise awareness about the damage we're doing to our planet. These are the words and the thoughts that allow us to feel and hear the pain. Teshuva. This is the shift in consciousness, allowing us to draw from our spiritual traditions to gain new insight about the world as it could be, embodying the hope that we most desperately need. And tzedakah. This is the life-sustaining systems and the practices that we'll build together. It's a rethinking of the way that we act and live in the world. It's building new practices that will allow us to legislate our hope in our community. This is the kind of spiritual practice that I hope we'll adopt during this year of tzedek at Bethel. Not only about committing to engage in acts of justice, but committing to the meta-narrative of the Great Turning. Because we know this about justice work, that when our hope becomes a verb, not only do we build solidarity with our wider community, but we find joy in the struggle. When I think about the climate emergency in Rosh Hashanah, I remember that for all of us, in every moment, our world is ending. Simply put, our time on earth is limited. And for me, if I need to choose how I want to spend my time here, I want to be living my hope. I want to live it shoulder to shoulder with the people that I most love. I want to do the hopeful work that makes me smile when I look into the mirror. The work that makes me want to sing. And I want to leave open the possibility for surprise. Hayom harat olam. This day is the birth of the world. Or perhaps better translated, this is a renewing of the world. We understand that each year we are walking into a completely new possibility. Something that was invisible last year may become apparent this year. A Chinese proverb compares hope to a path in the countryside. Originally, there's nothing. But then, as people walk this way again and again, a path appears. So I returned to the original source of the starfish story this year. It's in a book called The Unexpected Universe by an anthropologist named Lauren Isley. And in the original story, the thrower is not a young boy, but an older man. The author is walking on a beach where many people are collecting starfish. And one man is not collecting them, but is throwing them back into the ocean. And when the author asks the man what he's doing, the older man continues throwing starfish. And he says, "It may live." Our future is uncertain, but perhaps we will live as well. Perhaps we will be inscribed in the book of life against the long odds. And perhaps this year we will perform the act of hope that will spare our climate and our communities, and that we'll work together to make it so. L'Shana Tova.